Well, hello, crafty friend. Catherine and Erica here from Catherine Pooler Designs. Welcome to What's on Trend.
We reached out to some folks and asked them what kinds of things are they seeing, what kinds of things are they loving right now.
Yes.
So some of our friends have come together to share what's on trend in their craft room.
Every Sunday night at 8 p.m., we have a new video premiere going up for you. You can join us live for the first playing of the video. Chat with us in the chat box. The videos will be available after the fact as well as replays, and you can chat below the video. We want to know what you are really excited about in your crafty space right now. So what's on trend for you? What are you excited about? What are you having fun with?
We are going to kick things off with Rebecca Keppel. We absolutely adore Rebecca. She is delightful. You are going to love learning from her right now. She is obsessed with layered stencils. So she's about to dive in and show you guys all of the fun things that you can do with them and why it's like a fun alternative to traditional coloring.
Wait till you see what she does with buttercream. Just saying.
So yummy.
So all the products she's using in this video are from Catherine Pooler Designs. They can be found at shop.catherinepooler.com, and we will have everything linked in the description below.
Yeah.
Let's dive in.
Let's do it.
I'm excited to see what Rebecca has to share with us.
Yay.
And we'll see you every Sunday at 8 p.m. for the next 5 weeks.
Hello everyone, I'm Rebecca Keppel, and I'm super excited to be here on the Catherine Pooler Designs YouTube channel as a part of this What's on Trend video series. There are always lots of trends in card making, whether it be from new products or a technique that comes back into style. And today I'm sharing one of my favorites with you all, which is layered stencils. For those of you who haven't tried layered stencils yet, they are basically a set of stencils that help you color in a detailed image quickly and easily. As someone who's not a real pro at coloring, I have found layered stencils to save me tons of time and to help me create beautiful colored in images with just a little bit of ink blending. Layered stencils are often combined with stamps, dies, or foil plates. And in today's video, I'll be sharing the Hearts of Flutter bundle, which features all three of those. So first, let's take a look at those layered stencils and some other products that can be really handy to have when you're coloring them in. Here's the Hearts of Flutter stamp set and stencil set. There are 4 stencils in the set, and you use them one at a time to color in the main image of the stamp set, so you can see that they line up perfectly. I love using detail blending brushes from Catherine Pooler to color in those images because the parts of the stencil that you're coloring in are small, so it's fun to be able to color them in different colors of ink. I also love using the detail blending brush and tool holder from Catherine Pooler to keep all my blending brushes right at hand while I'm working. Now, let's use the stamps, hot foil plates, and the dies to create a whole bunch of different colored heart images. I want to share different ways to create the heart image and also different ways to color in the image. So first up, I'm just using a basic stamp and stencil technique. So I'll use some Midnight ink from Catherine Pooler and ink up this stamp. This is how you would stamp it if you were just going to color it in with markers or pencils or anything else. And you can see that there are lots of little details to this image, and if I had to color them in, it might take me a little while. I'm going to really clean up that stamp really well because I also want to stamp it in buttercream ink, which is a real nice light color. This would be something I would use if I were doing no line coloring, but I don't have to do no line coloring if I have the stencil set. To hold my cardstock and stencil in place, I'm using them inside my mini Misty, which has a sticky mat inside it. This is the Sweetheart 6x6 pattern paper. I know I'm going to be using this pattern paper for my cards, so I'm grabbing the inks that are listed on the front of the pattern paper so that I know that my hearts will all match up to the colors in the pattern paper. Here I have It's a Girl and one of the detail blending brushes, and I'm lightly coloring in the colors of the flowers. So you can see with the blending brushes, you really get a lot of control and you're able to color in just little spots that you want. Here, these other flowers, I'm using Samba, and so I really don't want to cover up the whole stencil with that bright red. I just want those 3 flowers to have it. Now for the butterfly, I want to use Minted. It's another color that's listed on the pattern paper, and so I know it will go really well with whatever pattern paper I choose to use with this particular heart image. And you can see how easy it is with the detailed blending brushes to stay within that line of the stencil and to not get my Minted anywhere I don't want it. So detail blending brushes and layering stencils go together really, really well. They complement each other perfectly. I'll peel off that first stencil and you can see how this is starting to come together. I'm using some tape that I would use to hold dies in place, something that's pretty sticky but is not going to tear the paper at all. And that is holding that stencil in place on the paper because I didn't necessarily stamp the heart perfectly centered on that A2 piece of pattern paper, which means that my stencil is a little off center, as you can see at the top. That's okay. It's very easy to line up by using the lines of the image, and that's why it's nice to have those lines of the image first before you go in and use the stencil. Here I'm using Bellini ink, and I definitely use different techniques depending on what amount of ink I want down on those flowers. Sometimes I flick, sometimes I dab with the brushes, and sometimes I use a circular motion and just color the entire image in. Here I have that buttercream color that we stamped with previously, and I'll use that as the lightest color on these large flowers. I also did grab some cummerbund. Now this is not one of the inks on the pattern paper, but I wanted the butterfly wings to have a detail that was slightly different than the flowers. So the butterfly itself is minted and that little detailing is in cummerbund. Now check out these flowers, super pretty. And when I'm working with flower centers, I can use a slightly darker color as well. So It's a Girl is perfect. It's a perfect pink to go with these large flowers. And depending on whether you ink up the brush every single time or just use the ink that's on the brush, that will depend on how dark the color is on this stencil as well. And here for the other part of the butterfly details, I am using Hoodie ink, which is listed as one of the colors on the pattern paper, which means I know everything will match perfectly. And look at how beautifully and quickly that came together. The easiest coloring you'll ever do.
Hey friends, sorry to interrupt your crafty time. We have 3 $50 gift cards to the Catherine Pooler Design Shop up for grabs. Click the link in the video description below for more info on how to enter to win.
All right, next let's use the stamp and stencil technique with the buttercream ink to see the difference between the black outline and then the very light outline that will kind of blend in with the inks that I'm coloring with. So starting with Bellini, you can see that you can just see the haze of the outline, but it's not dark and it's not contrasted the same way that it is with the black ink. So for something a little different, try a different ink color with your stamp when you're using stencils to color it in. I guarantee it will change the effect of the entire background. So for this one, I am using basically the same exact ink colors, but what I like to do each time is change up which flowers I'm using with which color I color in the butterfly, so that they will all look similar and consistent, and they'll all go with the pattern paper, but they'll all have their unique hue and gradient of colors. Again, using different techniques for your coloring, whether it's dabbing with those brushes or circular blending with those brushes, and whether you're using a heavy layer of ink or a light layer of ink. I love this. I think it's so pretty and different than the black outline. This time I wanted to start with the stencil, so I cut an A2 piece of white cardstock and I'm lining it up perfectly behind the stencil so that it is perfectly straight. And then I'm taping the top of the stencil onto the cardstock. Then I'll place it in the corner of my mini Misty, which has that sticky mat underneath, and then I'll be able to color in the entire image and not worry about having to line everything up. It will always line up with the cardstock, which is a really nice way to do it. And you can do this with any type of stamping over top. You can stamp over it with midnight ink, with buttercream ink, or whatever you want. But this time we're going to stamp and heat emboss. But first, we need to color in all those images. Once again, I'm using the same range of colors. It will look different because each time I'm using a different assortment of colors for each stencil, and that changes the look of the entire heart. Plus, some of them I go more heavy on pinks and oranges. Some of them I bring in those greens, the minted and the hoodie. And really all those little changes make such a big difference in how the images looks colored. So don't think that just because you have one image and one set of stencils that you're only going to be able to make one type of looking card. You really are able to play with it if you have a nice assortment of those Catherine Pooler inks. They just blend so beautifully over the stencils. Once the entire image is stenciled, I'll line up the stamp on top, then place some anti-static powder right on top of the image to make sure that nothing sticks to it. I'll use some embossing ink on the stamp itself and then stamp that out. I'm also stamping some of the little flowers from the stamp set, and I'll pour gold embossing powder all over the top. Then I'll heat set the little flowers and the image on top of the stenciling. And I am so happy with how that came out. It is such a light look because of the colors that I chose. And I just blended some of the ink on top of the flowers that I stamped and heat embossed as well. You can also foil and then stencil because there is a beautiful foil plate that matches that same exact design as the stamp. So when I'm foiling, I like to tape down my foil to an A2 piece of white cardstock. Here's that foil plate. You can see it's the same image. I'll place my foil and cardstock on top, and then my thin shim and my plate on top of that, pull out the platform, and then run it through my die cut machine. And when it comes out, you will see it is absolutely gorgeous as a foiled image as well as a stamped image. Check that out. That gold foil is absolutely gorgeous. I also foiled it in a rose gold color and then also in a dark blue color, which is sort of unique and contrasts just like the dark stamped image does, but it has that shine to it as well. I did want to share that if you don't have a mini Misty or a place to put the stencil and the cardstock into, that's okay. Tape it down to your protected work surface. I'm taping it down to my glass mat, and you can see that the tape is touching the cardstock and the stencil on top. That's going to keep your cardstock in place. So really make sure that everything is taped down because then you can really have fun with the coloring and not worry about it sliding all over the place. I definitely recommend several pieces of tape and one of them at least touching both the stencil and the cardstock, even if you have to wrap it around like I did in one of the previous ones. This time I'm going a little bit darker with those oranges. Last time we did a much lighter look, so this time I'm really going a little bit heavier with some of the colors. And again, that is just the fun of playing with layered stencils because it is so quick that you can make a whole bunch of these really quickly. And you can see that the foil resists the ink, so it still shines. If you find some of your ink on the foil, just buff it with a soft cloth and it will come right off, because the foil, just like a heat embossed image, will resist those inks. Here you can see that I'm using more of the minted and some really heavy application of the samba. And then here I have some It's a Girl on top of that. So just again, When you are sticking to a universe of colors like this, you can still get creative and change the look. Of course, if you're not trying to match it to a particular pattern paper, you can go to town and use as many colors as you want in any color combination that you want. But I really like how this one turned out with some more of the hoodie gray as well. Here, we're using the same foiling and stenciling, but I'm going to add in a layer of texture paste. This is the Tim Holtz Ranger Distress Texture Paste with sparkle in it. You can see I have my last stencil here, and I'm covering up some of these flowers with the texture paste just using a palette knife. So I want to make sure that they completely cover those flowers, but I don't want to do too much smearing back and forth. That's why I'm going very lightly to cover up these images, because I don't want to react the ink, because the ink is water reactive, right? So I want to quickly get my paste down on top of these flowers and not smear any of the color. Then carefully lift off that stencil. The paste will look white right now, but it will dry clear and sparkly. The die cuts out that main heart image, and there are dies to cut out the small flowers as well. And now, of course, we have to turn all those gorgeous hearts into cards. For this first card, I'm using an A2 piece of the pattern paper from the Sweethearts pattern paper pack. And then I've cut down a piece of white cardstock to about 4 by 5 1/4, maybe a touch smaller. I'll have some foam squares behind the heart. This heart is the one we stamped in buttercream and then stenciled on top. I'm using a hugs die to cut out the word hugs out of some Spellbinders pop-up foam in colors. This is available in the Catherine Pooler shop. I thought the colors really went nicely with the colors from the pattern paper and the inking as well. Now I have It's a Girl, and I'm inking up the shadow of the hugs die. Anytime you see this where you are dragging the ink pad and it's sticking sort of to the paper and then you're getting white spots, that means it is time to refill the pad. So thankfully, I always have the refills on hand because this is one of the colors that I absolutely love and use all the time. I'm a big fan of pink. And so I'm just placing a whole bunch of ink squiggled all around the ink pad, and then I'll just let that sit for a while with the lid on it so that it just soaks into the pad. And while I'm waiting for that, I did finish the shadow at least, and I'll use a little bit of liquid glue to adhere the hugs letters down to the shadow, and then some foam squares to pop that up on top of the heart. This sequin set is called Crater Lake. It's one of my favorites. There are several different sizes of sequins inside, and they all have a ton of shine. So I'm using an embellishment tool to place them onto the heart in the flower centers and a little bit of liquid glue to hold them in place. This was so easy to create because the coloring went so fast. I'm using this heart image to create a horizontal A2 card. The sentiment is from the Hearts of Flutter stamp set, and I'm stamping it in a nice gray but darker gray ink. Then I'll use the My Sweet Petunia precision press and add a little thin line of glue down the side. I've cut 2 strips of pattern paper. This is a really pretty striped pattern paper, and I'll place the entire strip down so that I can line up where I want the pattern paper, what color I want it to start on and end on at the bottom. That will allow me to line it up perfectly, and then all I have to do is flip it over and use some detail scissors to cut off anything that's hanging off the card really quickly and easily, so that I'll have 2 strips that have the exact colors of the pattern paper at the top and at the bottom. Once again, I'll use some foam squares behind the die cut heart. I really like this image popped up. I think it's so much fun. And once again, super simple to complete this card because the coloring took no time at all. For this next card, I'm using the largest rectangle from the Dots and Scallops die set, and I'll cut out this piece of pattern paper and mat it onto an A2 piece of white cardstock. Check out how much smoother the ink pad slides across the paper when it's refilled. So anytime it's dragging, be sure to refill your ink pad, and then heat set that before you die cut it because it will be nice and juicy. I have another piece of the Spellbinders foam in another color, but this time I'm using it how it's intended, to pop up the sentiment, and it's a great background for this die cut. So it will perfectly pop up that thin script. I'll just slide the die cut into place with some liquid glue underneath, and then it'll be nice and dimensional, and you won't see any white foam pieces sticking out from behind. I actually did leave it slightly off center so that it did have a little bit of a hint of a shadow around that Hello die cut. So now I have another one of the Dots and Scallops. I've cut it out of vellum, and I've adhered a scallop rectangle over top of that vellum so that I can place the adhesive for that behind the white cardstock. And then I'll pop up my Hello die cut at the top there, and then pop up my heart underneath. So much fun to put all these pieces together and look at that gold heat embossing around the stenciled image. For this card, I die cut the Cosmic Cover Plate die out of white cardstock. And now I'm using that same swiping ink technique, but I'm using 3 different inks, and they'll cross over a little bit, and they do blend together beautifully at those points where they cross over. So I started with Buttercream, then Bellini, and then Glitz. Those are all colors that go with the pattern paper as well. I used a little bit of liquid adhesive to adhere that cover die cut down to an A2 piece of white cardstock. Here is the heart that we foiled and then colored and then used texture paste on top. And you can see how that texture paste dried clear and it has those sparkles in it. So don't be afraid to go beyond inks and coloring and add different types of pastes and things on top of your stencils. Just be sure to clean them off right away so that the paste doesn't stick. I have that Hugs die again, and I've cut it out of a piece of cardstock that I colored with the Samba ink on top of a white shadow. I love these colors together. They are so much fun, and they were so easy to create because I had that color combination picked out for me. For this next card, I'm using the heart that was stamped with Midnight ink. So I'm going to stamp a sentiment with Midnight ink as well. Now, this sentiment is from the Forever Yours sentiment stamp set, and I have one that I'll place at the top of a piece of A2 cardstock. Again, I'm stamping that in Midnight ink so that it matches the ink color behind the stenciled hearts. I did cut that white paper down a little bit smaller than 4 by 5 1/4 so I could mat it on some of the pattern paper that has that minted in it to go with the butterfly. For this next card, I'm using the It's a Girl ink once again on cardstock. I'm covering the entire A2 piece of cardstock with that color. That is why my ink pad was dry, because I do use it all the time. I have one of the hearts, and I'll place it slightly off the edge of a piece of cardstock that is smaller than A2 because I want to mat this on top of that pink in the background, and I'll cut off the excess. Now I have another sentiment from Forever Yours, and I've stamped that in Midnight ink at the top left, and then I'll mat this down on that pink background. I'll use those flowers, those individual flowers from the Hearts of Flutter stamp set that I stamped and heat embossed. So these are going to be a different color than the heart. I think that's okay. I like the look of the gold heat embossing and then the rose gold foil around the Hearts of Flutter heart. Now I'll take that My Sweet Petunia Precision Glue Press, once again, add a couple of small dots of liquid adhesive in the center of those small flowers, and then use the Crater Lake sequins and use those as flower centers. I absolutely love the different look, the cut off heart, and the rose gold with the heat embossing. There's so many different options with stencils and layering. I hope you enjoyed this episode of What's on Trend with me and Catherine Pooler Designs, and I really enjoyed sharing one of my favorite trends with you all. If you've been avoiding them, take out those layered stencils and give them a try. I promise they are so easy to use, and the result they create is beyond amazing. Thank you so much to Catherine and Erica for having me today, and thank you to you all for showing up and spending some time with us.